Welcome to the Diversity Project Pathway podcast. My name is Omotunde Lawal. I am Head of Global Corporate Credit and Emerging Market Corporate Credit at Barings. Alex and I will be your hosts on this new podcast series. Through this podcast, we aim to highlight the journey of female portfolio managers, highlight members of our Diversity Project Pathway program, and delve into topics associated with portfolio management. We will be launching one podcast per month, so please do tune in. We have some exciting topics coming up. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Kate Hollis. And the topic we'll be discussing is View from the Other Side with Kate Hollis. So, Kate, welcome to the podcast and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tunde. Thank you very much for inviting me, and hello, everybody.
And perhaps you could introduce yourself to our audience just to tell them sort of your name. Well, we know your name now, but sort of your role and where you work, and then we'll sort of take it off.
Yes, I'm Head of Global Credit Manager Research at WTW, where I've been for the last 10 years.
Amazing. And for those who don't know, Willis Towers Watson is one of the key voices in the sort of fund selection and consultant space within asset management. Okay, so let's kick off. Kate, so for our audience, and to just sort of break them into our episode today, could you share one less well-known fact about yourself?
I am one of the very few people, possibly now the only person left in the market who was in the market when gilts yielded 15%. And I profoundly hope I'm going to have retired before they get there.
Before you see them again. Were you worried in the last sort of mini-budget crisis with Liz Truss that we could get there?
No. Not from where, well, if we had got there from where we started, it would have been a complete cataclysm. But I very cunningly have a habit of going on holiday over major market crises. So, in fact, I was in Sicily at the time. And
no.
I got back.
Well, there was places to be to sort of get that sort of news broken to you. Hopefully you had a glass of limoncello or something equally lovely to hand to soften the blow.
Absolutely.
Great. All right. So let's dive straight into it. So, Kate, you know, very impressive title, very impressive career journey. Could you maybe tell our audience what your journey has been like to get to your current role?
Yep, I'm a fixed income person through and through, but coming at it from a number of different angles. So for the first 15 years of my career, I worked in fixed income sales and trading across a number of investment banks in London and also in New York. Then I did 5 years in funds of hedge funds, both as a researcher and also on the product side, which taught me an awful lot about how funds are constructed. Then I did 10 years at another management research house, looking at both fixed income and also hedge funds. And then for the last 10 years, I've been at WTW, all on fixed income. But everybody at WTW wears a number of hats. So I have a hat that says diversity. I have a hat that says LDI. Everybody has a hat that says ESG and sustainability.
Absolutely.
So various things to talk about.
All right. And for our sort of audience listening, what is anyone who's aspiring to be a you in the future, what would you say is the skill set that would be required to cultivate, to sort of ascend?
Manager researchers come from all sorts of angles, and certainly we believe very strongly that cognitive diversity can enhance robust decision making, and our process is all about robust decision making and the wisdom of teams. And so therefore we want as many different perspectives as we can possibly get. One of the things I worked for years to do was to try and find a psychologist on the team.
Oh, wow.
Just because there are so many managers I've seen throughout my career who are very dominant, who don't respect challenge. And finding somebody who can look at the composition of a team and identify whether there is sufficient challenge going on is, I think, a really important skill. We found her through the Returner program. She's a qualified engineer and a qualified psychologist, and she's a fabulous member of our team.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And in equal parts, because one, it's a returner, so clearly that sort of new initiative is working and yielding success, and two, the fact that there are actually psychologists on the team assessing portfolio managers. I find that very fascinating. I wonder what my assessment would be like. So Maybe we'll sort of come back to some of the things that you and the team look at a little bit later. But first, perhaps we could go to sort of, if you could share with us, what are some of your observations in the couple of decades or more that you've been in the industry? The asset class or the industry has evolved a lot. And maybe you could share some of the observations of what you've noticed over the years.
Gosh, where to start? When I first started, it was before the Big Bang. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it was before essentially the American investment banks came in and bought up the whole of the UK securities trading industry. And that also has fed into investment management. It means that investment management and London, the city of London as a whole, and investment management in particular, has become a lot less clubby.
Right.
It means it's become a lot more professional. It means it's become, this will really sound odd, it has become less diverse. When I started, there were historians, there were theologians, there were modern linguists, there were teams of either portfolio managers or in the trading rooms were very diverse from that point of view. Portfolio management, though, tended to hire, as you can imagine, from Oxbridge, from Durham, from Edinburgh and Bristol, and also they tended to hire people who the existing CEOs played golf with their father. From that point of view, it was very undiverse. And of course, by gender, it was totally undiverse too.
Absolutely.
So, but we went through a phase, and again, this is after the Big Bang, after the Americans came in, particularly in fixed income, when people suddenly realized that mathematics, statistics, econometrics, modeling, all of these things could be really useful in investment management. And we went through a stage where people moved from having a wide range of educational disciplines to being maths, economics, finance, which is something which I think is somewhat regrettable, she says, speaking as a mathematician. And I would like to see reversed, because I firmly believe that to be somebody on the portfolio management team needs to have an appreciation of history, and therefore having a historian on the team could be useful.
That's interesting, though, because I feel like although there's that misconception about the asset management industry that it lends itself to people who have studied numerate degrees, I find that there are still a few people floating around with history of art degrees or literature degrees. Not that many. I will definitely agree with you. But do you think that shifting towards more numerate backgrounds within asset management is a function of how the markets themselves have evolved? Because the markets, there's less opportunities to exploit market dislocations, and if the markets function a bit more efficiently, so actually it's really just about the numbers as opposed to the nuances of knowing the history or the qualitative aspects of it.
It was back in the day just about the numbers, because somebody who could understand the numbers had an edge. Now that everybody understands the numbers, where's your edge? And it's on stuff that by definition isn't numeric.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is true, although I've never heard it explicitly said, if you have a PhD, it doesn't matter whether it's econometrics or mathematics or whatever else, and they don't work out, as a hiring manager, you can say, but they were so well qualified, how could I tell? Whereas if you hire someone who you don't know until you've hired them, you have no reason to believe that they're a brilliant trader or have an innate
sort of sense of numbers,
sense of what risk is as opposed to what the numbers tell you, then you can't say that. So it may be something else. Of course, the other thing, I'm terribly sorry, I should have said earlier, the other thing about the City of London back in the old days, absolutely lily white. Really lily white. And of course, that has now changed.
Thankfully.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, there's been a lot that's happened in the industry. So for our listeners, if you've got a non-numerate background, definitely Kate does encourage you to stay the course and definitely look to forge a career in our industry, because we need that cognitive diversity, as you say, is very important. So following on from that, what do you see perhaps as the next frontier or the biggest growth potential for the industry then, considering how far we've come?
The savings industry still only touches a small number of people, a relatively small number of people. There are huge swathes of the global universe, global population, who just wouldn't recognise a unit trust if it bit them on the ankle. This is particularly in emerging markets, but the middle classes in emerging markets are developing. They're starting to be interested in these subjects. But even here in the UK, there are many people who are financially unserved or underserved, where I think there is great scope for the industry to address their needs. The other thing I think that is also true, and it's something that we talked about a lot when I co-wrote the Diversity Project submission to the FCA when they were looking at diversity a few years ago. And one of the things we said is the industry certain that even for the clients it's adequately serving their needs? Do they know that this particular investor, for example, used to be employed full-time but has had a dreadful car accident or some other reason has had to give up work and now has very different financial needs? Are they monitoring this? Are they adapting their products to this? Or are they just assuming that savers either want the conservative, the balanced or the high-risk option and that's all they need to provide? So I know we're going to touch on AI later, but these types of things, I think, are the next frontier for the industry.
Right. Okay. So reading between the lines of what you said there, sounds like you think that we need more reforms around pensions and retirement products, perhaps.
I think we need more reforms and consideration around products of all types, because there are other ways of saving other than pensions. I think the entire savings industry needs to look at what it's trying to do for its clients and is it doing it efficiently. And as I say, reach out to those who are not yet served by it, address their needs.
Okay, that's fantastic. So maybe now we sort of switch slightly and sort of for our listening audience, the ones who are aspiring to be future portfolio managers or fund managers, you've seen a fair few in your time. And so perhaps you could maybe share with us, what are some of the key things in your opinion that make a good portfolio manager?
They need to be experienced. They need to be curious and not set in a particular mindset. They need to be humble. People who always explain why they lost market money because the market was wrong, frankly, scare the pants off me. They need to have an innate or a good appreciation of risk. This is such a hard thing to define, but someone who's got good risk controls in their head and understands that today's risk is not the same as tomorrow's risk, and you need to shift your perception of risk and therefore your portfolio construction as the market shifts. It's a really difficult thing to develop. It only comes with time, but some people are naturally better at it than others. But I think it's an absolutely essential skill, because nobody could see COVID, but we're going to see things in the next week. A lot of the other crises that we've seen in the last few years are close repeats of things that I've seen throughout my career.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing. And speaking as someone who sits in that seat as well, it's always fighting against what is your natural instinct, or not fighting against, but working with what your natural instinct is, that behavioral finance element that we all succumb to, and then understanding what good risk management looks like. And sometimes you are successful in working the balance between all three, and sometimes less so. But I think you're very right. I think that's very key, is about not being wedded to any one particular style or view or trade idea that sort of precludes you from seeing other things that you should see and stops you from taking action that you should take. So, yes.
That being said, the flip side of that is we like managers to stick to their knitting. We don't mind. We fully appreciate there are going to be times when managers, particularly if they've got a very well-defined style, are going to underperform. That doesn't worry us if they're underperforming for reasons we expected them to underperform for.
Right.
And also, if they can limit the amount they underperform by,
The
i.e. they don't go all out to try and swing the bat to try and make it all back again.
Right.
But style drift is one of the things that we really worry about.
Right. But it's a very fine line, though, between having your style and sticking to it and knowing that you're underperforming because of that style, and then also trying to shift that to minimize the downside risk as well, because then that could fall into the sort of style drift bucket, couldn't it?
Most people have got a risk budget, however you define it.
Right.
And so minimizing the downdraft is by being at the tight end of that risk budget.
Right.
Or if you really feel, and some managers have done this, some managers have said, this market is not going to be friendly for me for the next couple of years, I just don't see it. You might like to think about something else. I have heard managers say that, which I think is entirely admirable, that they understand and are prepared to think about their clients' best interests.
That's very interesting that, so sort of putting out your hand up to say, please take me off.
Yeah, or please take me off for the time being. Because someone who said that to us is far likely to be listened to when they come back saying, I think this market's actually really interesting now.
Okay, which is a good segue to my next question, actually, which is, how do you decide when to add or replace managers within a strategy? So say someone came to you and say, can you take me off for now? How do you then go about, or how do you decide when it's time to take somebody off who hasn't put up their hand saying, take me off?
There are several reasons, and it's all to do with change or conviction. If we have lost conviction in them for whatever reason, and it can come in various forms, significant corporate change. I mean, a lot of these mergers that are going on at the moment has got to call into question the stability of the team and the strategy of the firm.
And culture fit as well.
And culture fit and all these things that we think are really important. Significant team change outside any sort of corporate event. Retirement cycles. I've never seen in my career as many managers retiring in their mid-50s as I have at the moment. It may be a comment on how much money the industry has made over the last few years, but in the good old days there were always some portfolio managers who essentially died at their Bloombergs, but mostly people went to the age somewhere in the mid-60s, retired, do something else. But lots of managers at the moment are saying, I've been in the market 30 years, that's enough. Right. It may also be a comment on the stresses and strains of the last 5 years, which have been extraordinary.
There have been more extreme cycles, haven't there? Certainly in the last sort of decade or so, and people are probably a bit jaded from navigating and have ulcers and all whatnot from trying to navigate those as well. Final question around this. You've been very generous enough to give us some tips and our listeners some tips on what they should be focusing on building and harnessing in their careers as portfolio managers. How do you evaluate a fund manager's potential for long-term success in this sort of uncertain markets where we've spoken about the sort of extremes and the volatility that's perhaps leading to some of these early retirement calls as well? How do you evaluate a fund manager's potential for that long-term success? How do you sort of bake in, okay, in a 10-year cycle, this fund manager is allowed to maybe have 2 to 3 down years? I know you spoke earlier about risk metrics. How do you evaluate that sort of what a fund manager's potential is to have long-term success?
We look at performance, but it is an indicator of more qualitative things. So what we look at, first of all, we don't look at fund managers in the abstract. It's all a question of what is this mandate supposed to do in the portfolio, and will the fund manager be able to deliver it? So through that lens, there are things that we always look at. We always look at the team, the experience. We always look at the approach, which includes ESG, which includes risk controls. We look at the alignment. Some managers are incentivized to make a lot of money short term and leave investors with all the risk. We don't like that. We look at the stability of the firm and the team, obviously. Process, fees. I mean, all this, fees is sort of a secondary consideration.
Oh, is it? Because on our side of the table, you typically think fees are are quite significant. Fees and performance, typically.
We are. They are. But at the same time, if somebody came to us who we thought didn't have a hope in hell, I wouldn't care.
It doesn't matter if they're offering it for 2 bips.
Because the risk return would be all wrong.
Right.
We have to have comfort that the manager is going to be offering us a decent risk return, and then the fees do become very important.
Right. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. It's good to know. So I'm getting some tips here as well.
Yeah. And things like diversification, not just do they have X number of credits, but a diversification of return drivers, for example, depending on the mandate. But are they using all the opportunity set they're being given, but not stepping beyond the bounds of that opportunity set?
Right. Okay, so the ability to sort of show consistency over a long period, as well as the framework in which they're working with in terms of process, middle office support, back office support, the whole infrastructure around it that sort of facilitates that sort of long-term success. Okay, all right. I know we spoke briefly about AI earlier, but sort of bringing it sort of beyond just AI in itself. Willis Towers Watson is known for fostering innovation. You guys have your Mix X series that you run all around the world. A lot of it focuses on innovation. Are there any recent or upcoming initiatives that you're particularly excited about?
The big problem I think that the industry is going to have with AI is what can legitimately be loaded into it. And the reason I say that is because a long time ago, our IT department sent around an email to everybody which said, essentially, those of you who are sad people have read the terms and conditions of Google Translate. We would just like to point out that anything you load into Google Translate becomes the property of Google. Whereupon legal and compliance said all the things you would expect them to say. I am not involved in this work stream, but I am very prepared to bet that legal and compliance are absolutely poring over what can go into AI. Until we know what we can go into AI, we don't know what we can get out of AI or how useful it's going to be. But, could you, going back to my previous example, load somebody's personal circumstances into some sort of AI model and get a better portfolio for them? Yes, probably, but that would include a lot of personal data.
Yeah.
So you could only do it with their consent. You could only do it retroactively. And to be honest, I think people in general are being a lot more wary about giving away their personal data and letting people do what they want with it.
Right.
I'm much more worried about it. I mean, look at the National Health Service programme
where you had the data leak. Yes, that's true. That's true. Perhaps also from a different perspective as well, when you're sort of looking at sort of managers as well, is that something that you're considering in terms of, are they incorporating AI or innovation into the workflow process? As you said earlier, it's about considering the workflow, the performance, the fees, all of these other sort of more qualitative things that you consider. Is the application of innovation something that would be a qualitative factor that you consider in how you select?
I'm going to turn it back. No, actually, I'm not. We have this database called Invest Connect, which is our platform for gathering information from managers, and we have got thousands and thousands of products from many managers around the world, and we have millions of data points now. I would love to be able to use AI to test some of our theories, like unstable teams lead to worse results.
Right.
Problem is that the data is extremely noisy. How you would clean it to adjust for market effects, is something that I just don't know whether you could do. And similarly, you could theoretically use AI to monitor balance sheets, but is that something that you feel it can do effectively, given a CEO has just left, the new CFO has come in and completely changed the financing structure of the company? Is that something AI could pick up and adjust for? I don't know. So
there are limitations to it, but it's about sort of, I guess the approach that, say, someone like me who sits on this side is taking is how it can enhance efficiencies within the teams, as opposed to really completely replacing those kind of more qualitative assessments where, you know, it's a new CEO and a new CFO and maybe there's changes to the financing or capital structure. Those parts, I think you would still always need that human interaction and that human element to, but perhaps it's more around what you can use it to sort of enhance.
Yes, I would agree. With reservations, for example, one of the things we do is we have quarterly meetings with managers to see what they've been up to. In most cases, you could take the deck that they've sent us, feed it through AI, and it could write the meeting note for you without even having to have the meeting.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that's interesting.
But we wouldn't do that for two reasons. First of all, the most interesting part of the deck is what isn't in it. And secondly, if we did that, how the hell would we ever train our juniors?
True.
So, I mean, you taking notes of internal meetings, Chat GPT or Copilot or whatever, absolutely fine. Would we use it to completely replace what we do? I doubt it. Is anybody going to? My husband is a barrister, and he just put a question into Chat GPT and said he got something out of it that he would expect a good law graduate to be able to produce.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
Now, it may get better. Who can tell? But what it didn't do is it had no context. It had no nuance. So I think it might happen, but I think it's going to happen, as you say, at the edges where there are clear efficiencies rather than the god of wonderful things the AI mavens seem to be projecting.
Right. So we shouldn't all worry that AI is about to replace us all, either from your side of the table or from my side of the table.
No. On the other hand, I mean, WTW has been a huge supporter of systematic investment for years. And there are clearly, if you're running a purely systematic process, there are clearly efficiencies or maybe new enhancements that AI can add to that. And I would be very interested to see whether the systematic managers are using this at all and what they're doing. And I think there's probably a lot of work going on, but I don't know if any of it has found any good results yet.
Okay, absolutely. Fascinating. And definitely as we continue to sort of evolve in our industry, I'm personally very excited to see what other sort of efficiency gains we can get from AI, especially for sort of our teams in terms of seeing the world, as you say, where you're getting more extremes in terms of things that happen from climate and all these other things. And so maybe some AI and things like that can help us be more sort of proactive in how we're considering our risk as well. Last question from me, or maybe second to the last, might sneak another one in there. But do you have any advice for our female pathway program audience looking to pursue careers as fund managers? What would you advise them?
It depends on the path that is open to you. In the good old days, graduate trainee, analyst, portfolio manager, in many cases that has changed. And so it's difficult to be too specific. What I would say is two things. First of all, take any opportunities that are open to you. It all helps broaden your understanding of the industry and broaden your network. And secondly, I would say women in particular tend to assume that if they do a good job, it will be noticed and they'll get promoted and they'll get what they want.
Yes.
Don't believe it.
Oh, really? It's not true.
Because people... Well, you may not know this. Somebody comes to you and says, I want to do this. And you say that, okay, fine, you can do it. There may be other people out there who are just as well qualified to do it and maybe would have liked to do it too, but they didn't ask. And so they miss the opportunity. And there are certainly people in this world, and I've worked with some of them. I said this to one of my direct reports not so long ago. You're doing fabulous work. There are people in this world who, if they were doing a job half as good as you do, they'd be doing victory laps around the office on a weekly basis. You need to get out there and be sure that people know that this piece of work is yours, that you're responsible for it, and that you are helping them. You need to get your name known. and you need to get your face out there. And women are very bad at doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So make sure you seek the visibility that gets you noticed. And remember to put your hand up.
When it doesn't. When you do something wrong, put your hand up and drive on. We all make mistakes, and it's just going to happen, and hopefully not too often. Make your mistakes, learn from them, drive on.
Yes. I think that's the key thing that a lot of us who've done this now for a while know is no one has this upward unfailing trajectory in this industry. There will be ups and downs, and it's about learning the lessons you need to learn and getting back in the car, and you keep going, as you say. Absolutely, resilience is key, very, very much so. Thank you very much, Kate. And before we leave you, can you just tell us, what are you most excited for 2025, if I could deign to ask that?
I don't know about excited. I'm certainly interested. I think that we started this year with everybody sending me pieces saying half the world is voting, it's going to be a volatile year. It really hasn't been. I think all the volatility we were expecting this year is going to turn up in next year. So let's see.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, you're right. At the start of this year, it was, it's the biggest year of elections in a long, long time, and it's going to be super volatile. It's actually ended up being one of the calmer years we've had in a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're probably right. And on that note, with that sort of insightful piece for us, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Tunde. Bye.
Bye.